Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to HA After Dark. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we're going to take a quick trip down memory lane to my super chat. Thank you so very much for your support. Let's take a quick trip down memory lane. President Obama, to many people on the left, is the greatest president of their lifetime. He is just, put on, if they could put him on Mount Rushmore, they would. People on the left, um, he's like a saint. They love him. He represents the epitome of a democratic president. He saved us from the recession. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. He represented everything that was good and noble in politics to a great many people. And that is just not true. President Obama did a lot of things, especially when people reference, well, he took us out of the recession. Well, Bush started the bailouts, and it didn't take that much courage to pump money into banks. See, you can lionize somebody for doing the right thing. But if you lionize, if you praise Obama, you'd have to also praise Bush, who is the worst president we've ever had. So Obama is this venerated figure. In reality, however, he did things that were pretty straightforward in terms of what he was supposed to do. Trump would have also bailed out banks. All right, let's see. Let's read this. The Economist. This is an April 15th, 2010 article. The recession, when did it end? You want to know when the recession ended? Shortly after Obama was elected. Kind of makes you, first of all, Bush was the worst president we've ever had. So I'm just going to go on record as saying George W. Bush was the absolute worst president. He set the Middle East ablaze. He presided over an economy that eventually tanked. He was the worst president. Definitely the worst president that I've ever seen. But here's an Economist article. Let's read this. When did it end? A question of not just academic interest. This is The Economist 2010. Now, The Economist is an establishment, kind of like the Washington Post and a British publication, but it's really their viewpoint is liberal, and they're going to always go out of their way to demonize Trump and to protect President Obama, Hillary Clinton. But this is, when did it end, the recession? So when did the recession end? The Economist, 2010, the American recession is over. April 15, 2010. Okay. Obama was January 2009. So about a year and a half, the American recession is over. In the summer of 2009, real GDP and industrial production hit bottom and resumed growth. And expansion in both measures strengthened as the year ended. Industrial production has continued to grow in early 2000, as in all likelihood has output. By the end of the current quarter, the American economy may have returned to its pre-recession peak in real GDP. Most economists agree about all this. Prominent voices like Northwestern University's Robert Gordon, Harvard's Jeffrey Frankel, and Stanford's Robert Hall have declared the recession dead and gone. But those men all sit in the National Bureau of Economic Research recession dating committee responsible for pinpointing the beginning and the end of business cycles. So, according to this article, the recession essentially ended about a year and a half into Obama's presidency. About a year and a half into Obama's presidency, it ended. Okay. So now this is an interesting article in the Huffington Post. I was published 100 times in the Huffington, or 200 times actually in the Huffington Post, but 100 times regarding Bernie Sanders, stating that he was better than Hillary Clinton. Thank God Trump won. So this is 2014, 5 years after the Great Recession. Our economy is still far from recovered. 5 years after the end of the Great Recession, the economy is far from healthy. A tragic mix of budgetary blunders and congressional inaction deserve the lion's share of blame for this. This June marks the 5-year anniversary of the end of the Great Recession. So it ended in around 2010. Or even late 2009, actually, according to this article. The partial recovery has materialized has been quite uneven, favoring growth of corporate profits and stock prices over employment and wage growth. Now, this is really 2014. Now, now you have job growth under Trump. You have manufacturing jobs. You have jobless claims at record lows. You have a healthy economy, a GDP growing. So how did it take 8 years? It took 8 years of Obama's policies. How do you just start growing once Trump is elected? How does that work? And so tax cuts had nothing to do with it. Deregulation had nothing to do with it. Trump's more friendly economic environment, the fact that Trump is willing to implement tariffs to save the steel industry, you can just say that it started under Obama. Well, when did it start under Obama? Obama had a 1.5% GDP growth in 2016. So you have it right here. I mean, this is just one article. 5 years after Great Recession, our economy is still far from recovered. And unsurprisingly, a March NBC Wall Street Journal poll showed that 57% of American adults believe the United States was still in a recession in 2014, 5 years into Obama's tenure. So, I mean, this is so how does Obama take credit for Trump's economy? Aggregate economic activity still depressed. Just as the labor market is operating well below potential, so is the economy in general. Inflation-adjusted gross domestic product, the most comprehensive measure of economic activity, contracted 4.3% between late 2007 and mid-2009. Even as the U.S. key drivers, nearly 5 years later, the U.S. economy was still running 5.1% below potential GDP as of the first quarter in 2014. That means that a 40% of the shortfall in potential output inflicted by 40%. Okay, so the economy was underperforming even as late as 2014. Okay? Then you could just look back. You could just look. The Great Recession never ended. This is 2000 and hold on one second. Okay, so let's see here. Let's look at okay, so Obama economy. So Money CNN, let's just look at this. The Obama economy in 10 charts, 2.5% growth, 1.6% GDP growth, 2.2%, 1.7%, 2.4%, 1.9%, negative 2.8% in 2009. Fine. But it was the slowest, it was one of the slowest post recession growth rates. One of the biggest criticisms of Obama's economy is that growth has been sluggish. Historically, the US has expanded at 3% or more a year on average. So the Great Recession was a meat cleaver on the economy. Since then, the US has struggled to grow at much more than 2% under President Obama. Then that's when Obama says, oh, well, that's just, we're just going to have to deal with that. Not, not. This is CNN, by the way. Before it, I mean, it still was an extension of the Democratic Party. But I mean, under Obama, they didn't have to be zealots. They could just be like, oh, well, Obama isn't doing that great. But it was still, it's okay. We can just kind of try to be somewhat objective, kind of, sort of. So you don't have tremendous growth here. I'm just trying to find out how Obama can take credit for the Trump economy. This is okay. A big part of the concern stems from the fact that incomes aren't growing very much. The median household income in America is now 56,516, lower than it was prior to the recession. This is a January 6, 2017 article. Ladies and gentlemen, the median income, this is astounding, was lower than it was prior to the recession 8 years. After 8 years of Obama's economy, median income was lower than it was. The median income in America, this was in 2017, is now 56,516, lower than it was prior to the recession. Obama's economy was not very good at all. Not very good at all. It was primarily 8 years. Median income was lower than the recession. That is a startling statistic. Thank you, Omar Pena. Thank you. That is a startling statistic. And it's one thing to say, well, he had the recession. Well, but the recession ended around 2010. By 2017, median income didn't even reach that of the year before the recession. So 2007, the median income was 57,000. By 2015, it was still 56,000. It was 56,000. So it was still below. So what was he doing for 8 years? I already read an Economist article that said that the recession had already ended. It was already done and gone by 2010. And guess who started the bailouts? Bush. Bush originally pumped money into banks. It was President Bush who pumped money into banks. So what was Obama doing for 8 years? How can he take credit for what's going on now? Food stamps food stamp use peaked in 2013. The recession had ended though. So it's like 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. He had from 2010, really from 2009 until 2013, and food stamps peaked. I mean, this CNN money chart is fantastic. I mean, there's like 10 different charts here. But while manufacturing output has returned, blue-collar jobs have not. U.S. manufacturing employment has declined by about 100,000 jobs. Now, this article. I've read PolitiFact. It declined by 300,000 jobs. And then it says, well, robots are doing some jobs that humans once did. Well, the robots aren't affecting Trump's economy. 320,000 manufacturing jobs increased. So when I used to love Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders would talk about the little guy, I'd be like, yeah, that's great. You know who's helping the little guy? Trump. Trump's helping the little guy. Yes, he is. So let's look at some of these other charts. It's just it's Obama, the U.S. total debt is now over 7, up from 10 trillion. So it was close to $9 trillion increased in debt with an anemic economy. Wow, what an amazing president! What an amazing steward of the economy. So let's just talk about Bush bailouts. Nationalize. Okay, so this is NBC News. Bush signs financial bailout bill. President Bush signed into law an historic $700 billion bailout. This is October of 2008. President Bush signed into law an historic $700 billion bailout of the financial services industry, promising to move swiftly to use his sweeping new authority to unlock frozen credit markets to get the economy moving again. Under the plan, the Treasury Department would be authorized to spend as much as $700 billion to buy bad mortgage-related securities. So he had started the bailouts. September. U.S. to take over AIG, an $85 billion bailout. Central banks inject cash as credit dries up. Okay. Months before Obama was elected, Bush had already started. Luke St. Martin. Obama spent 8 years telling us what's. Let's go. They demanded 40%. Luke St. Martin. Thank you, Luke St. Martin. Thank you, Luke St. Martin. It's just all you have to do is take a trip down memory lane. Fed isn't nationalizing the banks, says Bush. Yeah, yes, it is. President explains intervention in the financial system is necessary to prevent a wider crisis. President Bush on Friday defended recent federal intervention in the financial system as necessary to ward off a wider economic crisis and said the actions were not just a Wall Street bailout. Well, of course it was. People look at the crisis and say, oh, it's only Wall Street. I don't think so. In fact, I know that if we had not acted, it would have affected the American people directly. Well, it did. It did. It did affect the American people directly. Now, one thing that I liked about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, of course, they're not talking about it, was the fact that they would be willing to break up too big to fail banks. 60% of GDP in 6 banks. So let's hold on 1 second. 60% of GDP, 6 banks. This is a PolitiFact article. Bernie Sanders was right. Bank of America, JP Morgan, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. All of them represented 60% of GDP by 2011. All right. So, but they don't want to they want Medicare. They want to talk about Medicare for all. That's even more impossible than breaking up too big to fail banks, which would be a monumental task. But it's like Obama's like, well, I got to take credit for what? Trump deregulation. So Trump's supply side tax deregulation vindicated by GDP. This is the Investor's Business Daily. The 4.1% spurt in second quarter GDP shows just how much policies matter. Not only did President Trump's tax cuts and deregulation deliver fast growth in the spring and early summer, but they will likely do so going forward as well. One sure way to know that Trump deserves credit for the biggest quarterly jump in GDP since 2014 is that much of the left-leaning media were either silent or dismissive of the achievement. Of course they were. They don't want to give him credit. As for the August New York Times, it provided this helpful takeaway. Economic growth surged in the second quarter, but don't expect the boom to last. Of course, it's like, of course, the Times and even economists noted that a big part of the surge in GDP came from a 9.3% jump in exports, much of it coming from a form of soybean shipment to China to beat the coming tariffs is a valid point. But we're still going to have GDP growth in the third quarter, so it's not just the soybeans. But drops in inventory subtract. Okay, so even so, trade is notoriously volatile. Strong underlying growth. Business investment grew at a 7.3% annual pace for the quarter, in large part due to corporate tax cuts that have made it profitable for businesses to invest in the U.S. again. There you go. Consumer spending, likewise, rose 4%. People had more money from the tax cuts in their pockets. So it's like it's like they don't want to give him credit, and yet Trump is really presiding over something special. CNBC, Trump has set the economy on fire. Here's how he did it. President Trump presides over an administration that has seen an enormous level of. Okay, so he delivered on promises to cut taxes and regulations and promote activity through more aggressive government spending. President Donald Trump is more than 19 months in an administration engulfed in so much controversy. Oh my God. Most of it's media driven. So he fired people. Who cares? Oh, controversy. Oh my God. The Steele dossier, that's going to fizzle out into nothing and cause people a whole lot of legal pain. Business confidence is soaring in part thanks to softer regulatory environment. Consumer sentiment, by one measure, is at its highest in 18 years. Corporate profits, owed in good part to last year's tax cuts, are coming close to setting records. Even if those accomplishments can be tied to either directly to new policies or at least indirectly through the brimming sense of hope from business that the White House is back on their side. At a time when most economists have been using the term full employment to describe the economy, 3.9 million more Americans have joined the ranks of the working during the Trump term. The economy in total, while still not in breakout mode, has grown 1.4 trillion through the second quarter. The same time period for Obama saw a gain of just 481 billion. So there you go. How he did it. Trump's economic program is very simple: an attack on taxes and regulation with an extra dose of spending on infrastructure and the military. That would create a supply shock to a moribund economy. On the tax side, the White House pushed through a massive $1 trillion tax reform. But what about the 1%? It helped the 1%. Yeah, well, there's 3 million more people working. It's all about the 1%. Well, yeah, the 1%, obviously, if you're going to decrease taxes, they make a boatload of money. So obviously, they're going to pay less taxes than anyone else. But I don't really care too much about the 1% as long as the 99% is lifted up. You have manufacturing jobs. You have, record low unemployment. You have 3 million jobs. On the tax side, the White House pushed through a massive $1.5 trillion reform that sliced the highest in the world corporate tax from 35% to 21% and lowered rates of millions of taxpayers. On deregulation, Trump ordered the rules be pared back or eliminated across the board. During his time in office, Congress. Okay, so they're like, well, what about this? What about that? Yeah, well, people are now working. It's not difficult. It's really not difficult to see the progress. Let's look at. So this is let's see if, of course, the Financial Times, then I'll let you. So I'm trying to there's a better business environment, which is related to what I read earlier on. Um, President Obama's economy was underperforming, and it just was underperforming. So I don't see how he just recently, of course, he wants to take credit. Then it's like and then Politico, Trump fights to wrest credit for the economy from Obama. How is it? How on earth is it even Obama's economy? It's 2 years into his presidency. And this is, of course, September 10th. Meanwhile, in May, I was saying the GOP is going to keep control of the House and gain in the Senate. I've been saying that in May. I've been saying that, on RT's Crosstalk in May. My Daily Caller article was published, in September? And September 10th, the White House, facing a brutal midterm landscape, is looking for ways to bask in the glow of a 9-year economic expansion. No, it said it was an anemic expansion under Obama. The worst. Wait, what was it? The worst post-recession economic recovery. Obama presided over the worst post-recession. Let's see. Obama worst post-recession. Well, this is right here. Debunking Obama's fiscal record, U.S. News and World Report. It goes on to just talk about how horrible Obama's. This is. We can read this, but why the Obama recovery took so long? The economy should have roared back. Instead, it crawled. This is the Wall Street Journal. So it was not a. You could say like economic expansion. Yeah, I mean, from the bottom of 2008, it moved slowly, it crept upwards. But you can't. I mean, the massive jolt to the economy once Trump took office, I don't think that's. I mean, the reality, of course, is that Obama does not, should not, can't take credit for it. Otherwise, it would have happened under Obama. How do you take credit for something that didn't happen? I mean, it's like 8 years and median income was actually still less than it was prior to the recession. President Donald Trump's economic advisors want recognition for the 20 months in the White House. Let me see what. The chart shows capital investments have declined by various measures during second half of Obama's second term. It's not justified. So they're like, oh, well, let's see here. Editorial, Las Vegas Review Journal. Obama wants credit for the Trump economy. First, in attacking the Great Recession, Mr. Obama followed a progressive, anti business agenda that empowered the administrative state and led to the worst recovery since the Great Depression in the 1930s. Not surprisingly, small business growth was in decline, and larger corporations pulled back investment thanks to an openly hostile presence in the White House. In addition, it took more than 6 years before Mr. Obama's economy had recovered the jobs lost during the downturn. That's a modern day US record for futility. This is the Las Vegas Journal Review. It took 6 years. 6 years. So I started off the segment with explaining that the recession was pretty much over by 2010, yet Obama's policies did not translate into immediate success. This is a really great article, by the way. It took 6 years. In addition, it took more than 6 years before Mr. Obama's economy had recovered the jobs lost during the downturn. So he's trying to take credit for massive economic growth when his economy was anemic. Second, the Obama administration's own economic team reportedly explained away the country's sluggish GDP numbers by arguing that 12% growth and high unemployment was that 2% growth was the new normal. Even 7 years into Obama's presidency, well after the downturn, growth was abysmal by historic standards, and the workforce participation rate had plunged. Not since Jimmy Carter donned a cardigan to deliver his infamous Malaise speech had a president preside over such a woeful state of affairs. That's one of the reasons Madam Cyberhack didn't win. Obama's economy was sluggish, less than stellar, and people were like, let's take a chance with Trump. And then you had Paul Krugman say, oh my God, we're going to have a global recession. That didn't turn out that way. The opposite took place. We're now growing at a very fast pace, and we're growing, and there's no bubble. This is not a bubble. This is not a stock bubble. It's not a real estate bubble. You have manufacturing jobs, 320,000 back into the U.S. Trump is actually renegotiating trade deals. He's using tariffs as a negotiating tactic. The steel industry is revived again. There's now life into making things and building things. In stark contrast, Donald Trump's agenda represents an alternative reality. The president has slashed regulations, cut taxes, and created an atmosphere of optimism among innovators, entrepreneurs, and job creators that was wholly absent when his predecessor was in charge. Mr. Obama, remember, warned in 2016 that these policies would make things worse. All this must be frustrating for the legacy challenge, Mr. Obama. Obama has no legacy, really. He just really has no legacy. This is from the editorial board of the Las Vegas Journal Review. He has no legacy. What's his legacy? The Affordable Care Act? Well, we still have millions of people who can't afford it. It's not affordable. Over what? $14,000 for a family, over $7,000 for an individual. It's not affordable. You had you can say that, oh well, the deficit. He had $1 trillion deficits also, Obama. Oh, here we go. This is the New York Magazine. I love this. This is unbelievable. Why does Trump get more credit than Obama for the same economy? Because it's not the same economy. I mean, how does that even like trying to go ahead? Oh, real wages. Oh my goodness. Here we go. When you have 3 million more people working, let's see. Indeed, the measure of people are most likely to feel directly real wage growth. There are 3 million more people who are actually making a wage or making a paycheck that didn't before Trump. Things have gotten distinctly worse over the last year. Not really. Um, real wages barely kept up with inflation during Obama's. This is a chart where this article is like, well, look at the real wages. Real wages barely kept up with inflation for what, like a year? Not even a year. Less than a year. Actually, it didn't keep less than a year under Obama's administration. It kept up with inflation. But inflation, this is a stupid chart because inflation is growing faster than under Obama because our economy is growing faster. So it's like you have GDP growth growing a lot. It's not. Why does Trump get credit for it? Because it's not the same economy. New York Magazine. It's like they're so delusional. They're so delusional. They can't. They just they can't. Oh, all right. So let's see. Oh, this is a great one. Letter to the editor. Obama taking credit for economic surge he said wasn't possible. That's so awesome. Democrats are running around trying to convince America the economy is actually failing. And now former President Obama wants to take credit for the economy. What we are experiencing is one of the fastest and most complete economic turnarounds in history. And most of it was done by fiat, by undoing what Obama did by fiat. Interesting. Congress has stayed on the sidelines for the most part. What has happened is President Donald Trump has wiped out about half of Obama's business industry job killing regulations, tax burdens, and worst of all, the ultimate job killer, Obamacare. That is to say, the mandate. When Obama's job stimulus bill failed to do anything except drain the American taxpayer of $1.4 trillion with nothing new to show for it, the job of analyzing and reporting unemployment figures was wrested from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the White House became the only source. This way, Obama and his cronies were able to put up the numbers they liked. Obama flatly stated that in a global economy, 1.6% yearly GDP growth was as good as he could do and as good as anyone could expect to do. Well, we now see. Now with annual GDP growth set to top 3%, Obama wants to steal credit for economic growth he said was impossible. That's a great letter to the editor. So first you say the economy stinks, then you say it's impossible to get past 2%, and then you say, "Oh, well, you know what? That's actually my economy." So this is interesting. Washington Examiner, credit Trump, not Obama, for economic boom, says Reagan advisor. A top advisor to President Ronald Reagan said Tuesday that President Obama deserves no credit for the booming economy and said all the credit belongs to President Trump. No, he doesn't, Art Laffer said on Fox News when asked if Obama should get credit. In fact, Trump does deserve credit. Laffer credited the tax cut and Trump's push to deregulate parts of the U.S. economy for the explosive growth seen in the last 18 months. He said Obama did things to hurt the economy, such as raise taxes and impose steep regulatory barriers to growth. And the economy grew the worst recovery and the economy grew the worst recovery in U.S. history under Barack Obama. During the campaign, Obama questioned how Trump would try to expand economic growth by wondering if he would simply wave a magic wand. Laffer said Trump does have a magic wand, and it's called good economics. If you tax people who work and pay people who don't work, don't be surprised if you find a lot of people not working. Well, I think it's also the issue of if your if your policies lead to stagnant growth or anemic growth, then don't pretend you deserve credit when a guy like Trump comes in. All right, so let's see. The White House said it has ended 860 pending regulations. So let's see. And this is also really, really interesting. This is also really interesting. The Trump jobs era is really different. If you look at Trump, you have a lot of manufacturing jobs grow. And with Obama, you had like warehouse and storage. That you had warehousing and storage grow, and motion picture and sound recording grow. Department and general goods stores. You had manufacturing grow. You had a whole bunch of different manufacturing jobs grow under Trump. Then, of course, people know the dangers of deregulation. So, ladies and gentlemen, then of course, Vox gets it wrong. Trump's budget assumes 3% annual growth. Why that's extremely unlikely, explained. This is in May of 2017. It's always explained. And of course, they're wrong. We're actually going to hopefully surpass 3% this year. It's like you the whole point, one reason people love Bernie Sanders, one reason I love Bernie Sanders is like, okay, look, his even though I was a lot more obviously way to the left, and I kind of looked at things like, oh, well, I'm fighting for like, this this kind of like moral crusade and justice and yeah, the top 1% and the banks. And it's like, well, but Bernie was never really too interested in economic growth. He never really talked about economic growth, which actually helps working people. If you bring up the bottom 99% instead of focusing on just trying to tear down the 1%, like I'm not defending the 1%, but you have people like, you have 40 million who don't have access to health care. It's because they can't afford the $7,000 of the Affordable Care Act. And Medicare for all, there's over $7,600 in out-of-pocket costs. I'm sorry, Medicare currently for 44 million people. And then the Mercatus study says you even doubling taxes won't work. And then the rebuttal from the left is, well, that's a bad study. It's like, well, what economist do you have on your side saying that Medicare for all won't tank the economy? So which one is it? You'd get free healthcare, but nobody working because the economy would tank. It's like everything is seen through the prism of this moral, rubric. There is no discussion. If you discuss, you are like a heretic. It's blasphemy. That's why when Ben Shapiro wanted to debate Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, she was like, no, you're catcalling. It's like, what? What are you talking about? So, let's see. Let's see. What's going on what's the latest on Twitter? The GOP is going to keep control of the House and gain in the Senate. And it's going to be a monumental cultural event. We're not just going to party. KKU, yes. It's going to be a cultural event, like a monumental cultural event. We're going to see the implosion of a very vocal element of American politics. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to call it an evening. Be here November 6th. Be here November 6th, 2018. Partay! November 6th, 2018. Horace! Horace, thank you. I hope I gave you a segment, everybody, and Horace, I hope I gave you a segment that you could just look back at and say, Obama did not preside over a really wonderful economy. It was anemic, and it was the slowest post-recession growth since the 30s. All right, everyone. God bless. Thank you so much. Horace, thank you so very, very much. I'll see you tomorrow, everyone. November 6th. And I've been saying it forever. And now you're seeing people are slowly, because they tried to put the full court press people. They tried to, the Democrats are going to take the House. The Democrats are going to take the House. And I was like, no, they're not. No, they're not. No, they're not. No, they're not. And now people are like, oh, they're not. And I was like, I told you. I told you. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been saying this. I have been saying this, ladies and gentlemen, since May. And I will be right. And we're going to have, it's going to be a really, really beautiful moment in American political history, along with the election. Tree climbing. Thank you, HA. Great chat group. Thank you so very, very much. Thank you. Conservatives of the core. Can't wait for November 6th. Yes. Conservatives of the core. Thank you. Tree climbing. Thank you, Horace. Thank you to my super chat. Thank you. It's going to be amazing, ladies and gentlemen. It really will be amazing. And it's going to be a cultural event because you're going to have confirmation that the media and the intelligence community cannot control your thoughts. It cannot influence you, cannot change the trajectory or cannot influence the direction of this country. They will be completely impotent. And this will be a devastating loss for the Democratic Party. You watch. The implosion alone, there's going to be the actual loss in midterms, and then that night and the next day and the day after, the implosion, the blame game, the oh my God, how dare you, oh my God, that type of thing. You did this wrong, you did that wrong, and different factions. And we're just going to have popcorn and watch on the sidelines, say, wow. And the way they react to their loss in the House, that will also convey exactly why they lost, because they don't really have a value system. When you have max boot, Medicare for all, it's an identity politics, people all under one umbrella. That's not a political party. That's just a whole bunch of people unified for political power. It's not a party with a value system. But anyway, GOP keeps control of the House. GOP gains in the Senate. And we find out exactly everything there is to know about Trump Russia. Thank you, everyone. God bless. See you tomorrow. GOP keeps control of the House, gains in the Senate. And I've been saying that forever. Now people are slowly jumping on the bandwagon. And they're slowly seeing it. And you're even looking at like CNN and MSNBC. They're like, well, gee whiz. The New York Times have all been like, oh my God, what if the Republicans actually win? Like they know, they pretty much know. When the New York Times is running articles saying, "What if Republicans win?" They're like, "Yeah, they know what's going on." Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe. Thank you so very much. God bless everyone. Thank you.